What's up, gangsters? How about some more tiny tank misadventures? Okay, so it's, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks later, and here we are with the little Sherman. So let's catch up, see what's going on. So you can see it is in a state of greater completion than it was before, and there's a bunch of 3D printed parts there in the background. There's some wheels sitting under that 1, 2, 3 block. Yeah, so let's just talk about all of the things. All right, so first of all, why are the wheels sitting under the 1, 2, 3 block? One thing that I love is when all of the stuff is square and straight and level and all of that, which of course wheels should be. And anytime I can use a fixture, a little bit of physics to help make that happen, I'm going to take advantage of it. So this thing has these wheels. Can't see it now. Maybe you can see it in the instructions if I can find them. Let's just take a look here. So I'm telling you about this because I love 1, 2, 3 blocks, and they're sort of like not intuitive. But everybody I know who's followed my lead and gotten some is later like, wow, I find so many uses for them. And this is another one of those uses. So if you look at these wheels, there's this boss on the inside of the wheel, and it's got that flat face right there, okay? Then you've got the tapered axle that I talked about in the last episode, and you've got that shoulder right there at the base of said axle. Obviously, what you would like is for the face of that boss to be coplanar with the face of that shoulder on all of these wheels. And one way that you can guarantee that is to just assemble the thing, let the wheels be wherever they are, and then take this, and the weight of the block will force all of the wheels down on, as far as they'll go, down onto that shoulder. And because these faces of the block are all parallel, and you can assume that the outside edges of these wheels are parallel with the faces of the boss, which has got to be parallel with the face of the flange. You see where this is going. So you basically have a series of parallel faces going from here, well, down here really, all the way down to the desktop. And when you do that, you just automatically guarantee that all these wheels are straight and true. And I just let the block sit there for, a few hours while the extra thin gets nice and cured, and so good. So all of the bogies are done, and I could put them on now, but I'm not quite ready because I'm not just totally done with this. I have, however, gone ahead and put these upper idlers, whatever you call them, I've gone ahead and stuck them on there because they weren't really going to be in the way of anything else that I was going to do. So got that all done. And as I said before, that's all painted underneath there. And this was also part of the reason that I did that was just to get it done and get it out of the way. Because my whole strategy here is to get all of the running gear painted up so that when I mount it on there, it's done, and then I can go ahead and do the track assembly and not have to worry about either painting all of the running gear on the tank or taking it back off. So that's why I'm doing it this way. I don't know if this follows the rules or not. This may be tank modeling heresy. Fuck, I don't know, but I just go with what seems the most effective and mitigates the most risks. So at any rate, those are on there. And I could go I could go ahead and put the rest of them on now, but I'm not quite done with all of this stuff, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But here's a funny story. Yeah, I'm laughing about it now. It's not really that funny, actually. It's super annoying, but you'll laugh. This, I'm sure, is the classic tank noob mistake, and that is forgetting to put the little poly cap inside the sprocket before you assemble the two pieces of said sprocket. I don't know if this is the one that's got it or not. Yeah, this one has it in there, so it's all good. The other one, not so good. Yeah, that one goes on there nice and tight like it's supposed to. I don't know if how far it's really supposed to go on, but yeah, this one, yeah, it goes all the way on and just spins around because, yeah, dipshit forgot the poly cap. And I don't know if I think I can get away without it. I think it'll be all right. Anyway, so that's that. Okay, so why am I not ready to put them on? And what all is this stuff that's happening? Okay, that gets into all these 3D printed parts. So, yeah, in typical fashion, going down the rabbit hole, I started looking at this thing, and there were just, things that I just didn't like because of the way that they were molded. Little things like grab handles and light guards and tow hooks to begin with. And let's see, here's the tow hook, and you can see, I mean, it's not too bad, it's not terrible, really probably would have been fine, but I decided that I wanted it to look a little bit more authentic because it doesn't have any space underneath the little bracket or whatever, between the bracket and the hook itself. And that, to me, lends a level of believability. So, of course, I went and designed some and printed them. And you can see, hopefully, what I mean there. I think those are a bit more realistic looking. So I've left the little T parts maybe a little too square, but I'm going to sand those a little bit and make them look a little more round like the real thing. Anyway, so those are all good, and let's see. Do I have any more? Oh wait, yeah, here's some in the box. This is how I printed them, so you can see them still on the supports. And if you're curious, if you're a 3D printing nerd, I have been printing all this stuff at 50 microns, which honestly I don't normally do except when I'm making stuff like when I printed all of the mandrels and the masks for the wheels. That's the kind of stuff that I print at 50 microns. And I print stuff like this at 50 microns just when I'm doing fit check prints. Like I know that the part's probably not going to work, and I don't really care so much about like surface finish. But honestly, these have been fine. You can see, if you look, you can see the layer lines on the hook there. But yeah, you're not going to see them on the model. And so I've just been running everything at 50 microns, and I'm pretty happy with it. So, and it's nice because, again, if you're not into printing yet and you wonder how long this kind of stuff takes, that right there is at 50 microns is about like less than an hour, maybe 45 or 50 minutes. If I print it at 20 microns, which is my normal detail part layer height, it would be, about 2.5 times as long. Which is no big deal because I usually print at night anyway and I don't care. But anyway, so the other thing that's not real great that everybody wants to replace is light guards. You can see that they're pretty chunky, as they would have to be for injection molding. Now, I knew that there was a group on Facebook called, I think it's called 3D 48th, and it's basically all 3D printable files and discussion on parts for 48th scale armor. And sure enough, there were some files in there for light guards and tracks and different things. The exhaust deflector, but yeah, I gotta be honest. I mean, and again, I have to be fair because I have CAD experience that goes back literally 30 years, and I've done it professionally. And there's a lot of stuff about that you're probably not going to glimmer to if you're just a hobbyist that's using Fusion 360 just to make stuff for your models. But yeah, the files that I got were not great, and it was easier, honestly, to just start from scratch rather than try to tweak them to make them look the way that I wanted them to. So I did that, and I have all of the light guards. So you can see that. That's actually the guard for the horn. And you can see that. And let's see, this is for the headlights. You can see that. So what I was after was to make them as thin as possible, because what they are in real life is like 1/4 inch by 1 inch steel bar stock. And so, photo etch would have worked pretty good for that, but it would have been even a little too thin. So, because, a 1/4 inch at 1/48 scale is about 0.1 millimeters. Well, these are 0.2, so yeah, they're a bit thick for scale, but anyway, not bad. And what you can see is that there's, on the tail end of that arm that's sticking up, that there's a little pin sticking out, and it's got a support attached to the end of it. So what's going on there is I figured, well, since I'm going to design them, I might as well also design them to be easy to install. And in fact, here's one that's not on the supports, and you'll be able to see this a little bit better. So there's the one for the horn, and you can see the little pins that I'm talking about. You gotta be careful not to breathe on it, it'll blow away. So you can see the little pins that I'm talking about. And so the deal is, let me see if I can demonstrate. So if you look, yeah, this will be, what are the odds of me pulling this off? You guys know, when I start trying to do shit on camera, it all goes south fast. So if you look, there's holes that I've drilled in the little notches that are molded in for the kit parts to fit into. Anyway, you guys can see what's going on here. Those little pins just drop into the holes that I've drilled, and there it sits. Makes it easy to assemble. I'll just drop them on there and then wick some super glue around them, and they'll be good. Now, are they pretty delicate, pretty flimsy? Yes, in fact they are. But this is a little bit experimental. I have been futzing with them, and I can tell you that they seem to be, obviously, they are pretty flimsy, and they're pretty bendy, but they don't seem real breaky. Like I haven't been snapping them off. And this is Craftsman gray resin, which is a little less brittle than some others, so that's good. I'm not going to use this one, so I can afford to wad it up. Basically, the reason that I have so many here is to just make sure that I had plenty of parts. Every time I came up with a new design, I just printed a bunch of them so that I'd have so that I have extras. So that's all covered. I've also got, let's see, this is the one for the tail lights. Right here. So there we go. So yeah, I think they're going to look really cool. They look a lot more authentic than the kit parts, and save me from having to fuss with any photo etch. So now the other thing, and I might have mentioned this in the last episode, you had all of these grab handles. There's 10 of them, like right here on top of the hatch. I think I did talk about, and I showed you guys the ones that I had made. So that's what all these are. I think I've already talked about that. Grab handles. Yeah, could have made them with wire, but I really think honestly that this is quicker and easier. Kind of like with my whole wheel production strategy. It might have seemed convoluted that I had to design and print the mandrels for the wheels and then the masks and then go through all these steps. But, I avoid picking up a paintbrush whenever possible. And so, even though I had to put in some upfront effort, every step after, that's easy for me. Doing the engineering, doing the CAD work, that's super easy for me. And then every step after that was also super easy. No penalty, no difficulty in taking a little bit of masking fluid and gluing the wheel to the paint mask, and then sticking all of the fixtured wheels on a piece of wood with double-sided tape and taking it to the spray booth and then spraying all, however many of them there are at once. I think, honestly, like when I think about the fact that, what it would have taken to paint them by hand, I could have mounted them on the bogies and then done, and then painted each one by hand. That, might have been okay. Or I could have done what a lot of people do, gone ahead and done a mandrel and put it in a rotary tool and rotated it and just held the brush up to it and painted it that way with the brush. But at that point, I've got to make a mandrel either way. So that's kind of a wash. I don't really see any advantage. And again, at that point, popping them off the mandrels that I used for smoothing off the seams and then transferring them over to the masking thick gizmo, yeah, not a big deal. Just all easy little painless little steps that I think gave me, a pretty high quality, consistent result. And again, even if there are some little, sort of issues, like the fact that the ridge there around the wheel is black instead of green, well, they're all going to get washes of dust and crud and all kinds of things. And I also, something that I also wonder about, and maybe some of you real tankerati guys can tell me, I feel like when I look at pictures of these things, that even though that's a rubber tire that's on that wheel, that at least on the outside, it all got painted green. And so that the real appearance of the wheels seems to be, in reference photos, that from the outside, it's all green. And you don't see the black until you look at the actual surface of the tread. I don't know. Anyway, as I've said before, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of going at this in whatever way seems to be most effective. So now let's talk about what's going on, what else is going on here. So obviously I've done a lot of work on the turret, got a lot of texture on there, and the texture I have done with just, doing the standard thing of brushing extra thin all over it and then using a stiff brush, which in this case, Deerfoot Stippler, and just, doing the tapping motion to create that orange peel or a grainy texture, whatever you want to call it. And I think that worked pretty well. So I did that, and then I added some Mr. Surfacer 500 and worked that a little bit more. I did a few things with some super glue just to kind of indicate like areas where the seam in the mold was not real smooth. And maybe this is a moment to talk about how these were actually made. So Some of you guys are probably familiar with sand casting. You know how it works, but if you don't, basically what sand casting is, it means that you literally are going to make a mold out of sand and a binder. And the binder is there so that you can pack the sand into a shape and it will stay in that shape. It's a process that honestly was invented, I've heard, like 5,000 years ago by the ancient Egyptians. And their binder was camel shit. And they figured out that they could pack sand and camel shit into shapes and make patterns to press into it. And that could then pour bronze or whatever and make early sand castings. It's a process that you can get really smooth surface finishes, but a lot of that depends on how good the pattern is. And I actually have a pattern that I'll show you that's really cool, because this is an antique sand casting pattern. And this actually, pattern makers were considered like the highest echelon of woodworkers back in the day, because they would build these patterns out of hardwood and they would be machined or shaped by hand. And obviously, a lot of really good joinery and nice finish. And then what would happen is that this would be mounted, the flat face of this would be mounted to a backing board, and then you build a box around it. And so this is sitting in the bottom of the box, and then you pack sand on top of it, and you pack it in really tight, and you let the binder cure, and then you take this face off of the box, and what you have left is a cavity that's the negative of this star-shaped wheel thing. And so if you do that, you can get really good finishes on sand cast parts. It's still the same basic process in modern factories, but nowadays, of course, the patterns are CNC machined or 3D printed or whatever. But it's still the same basic process. And I mean, there's a ton of parts in your car's engine that are sand cast. The fact that it's, a 5,000-year-old process notwithstanding. Anyway, the other sort of extreme, though, is that patterns can be really, really rough. And that's the case with something that's huge like this, where you can't really build a pattern like I just showed you. It's, there's a pattern that's, but it's not the whole outside of the turret and the inside of the turret. It's made up of pieces that they make, and then they basically glue them together like with plaster. And there's a lot of, like, the inside of the mold basically gets stuccoed. And that's why when you look at the castings on these turrets in real life, they look kind of like they're made out of concrete. Because, that's kind of the way the molds were built. And that's why they're just rough as shit. And they didn't care. They didn't have to worry about smoothing them all out. What they cared about was mass production and getting as many of these things cranked out as possible. And so that's why you'll see so many defects and irregularities in these castings, and it just really lends a lot of character to it. And so I don't know much about tanks, but I know that that's a thing, and I really kind of just want to produce as much of that look as possible. And so I've kind of worked to create a lot of those irregularities. I also included some casting numbers. I see that repeated in maybe not the majority of turrets, but in a lot of them. And so what I did is I printed some numbers, and if I can find them, I'll show you. What did I do with all the numbers? Okay, here they are. They were sitting right here in front of me. I lost track of them. Anyway, my first go at this, I designed it so that the numbers were on this little sort of backing plate that is 0.2 of a millimeter thin. And I tried to print that directly on the build plate, and that was a fail. One thing I've learned with 3D printing, at least you thought I'd learned, because otherwise I wouldn't have tried this, is that sticking to the build plate is as much a function of the rigidity of the raft, that's this thing here at the bottom, as it is of it just being glued to the build plate. And when something is that thin, it just doesn't want to stay stuck. So that's why then I moved to having it resting on supports. And you can see it's just kind of hovering there. But it comes off pretty easy. You just take a scalpel and you just go in there behind it. Just go in there behind it. And you can separate that off of there pretty easily. Oops, yep. But you may break it. Anyway, once you get it off of there, then you can just take that and glue it to the surface of the model. Okay, you can see the numbers there. And that's what I did with this one. That seemed to be the easiest, and it really was pretty painless, because once I glued it on there, then all I did was take my a burr and my rotary tool and kind of work around the edges of it and blend it in physically as much as I could. And then I came back and did the texturing, and I'm stoked. I love the way that it looks. One of my buddies, Tim Campbell, was like, aren't you going to smooth out that ridge up there at the top? And I was like, yeah, why would I do that? I mean, because this is authentic. The simple fact is that when they actually did this in the mold, it could very easily have ended up looking shitty like that, because again, they just wanted to get the numbers on there. They didn't care if it looked nice. So anyway, I'm pretty happy with that, but when I spray some primer on it, I may change my mind and do some more texturing or blending. We'll see. But yeah, you'll notice that this is my opportunity to add my ubiquitous number 19. I haven't seen one with number 19, but otherwise there don't seem to be a lot of rules with how these numbers appear or are arranged. So I don't even know what they mean, but they do look cool. Anyway, I wanted to try a couple of different strategies for getting those numbers on there. And another thing that I tried was printing each number individually. And you can see that here. And this is a little trickier to create in the CAD file, but it's not bad. And they printed very successfully, which I was not certain that they would do. And then when it came time to actually apply the numbers, this strategy worked fine, so I just went with that. But then later I was like, well, I wonder what would happen. You know, would I be able to actually manipulate the individual numbers? And I discovered that, and I'm sure that I will not be able to do it successfully on camera, but I discovered that I was able to take the number and slice the support off of it. And then the trick is not losing track of where the number is. And put a little bit of super glue down on the model, and then place the number just like that. And that was also really easy and a little bit less of a hassle, because I didn't have to blend it in. I had to worry about, what any of that looked like. I could just put it directly on my textured surface and go with it. And I discovered that by putting that one on there. And I know somebody's going to say, because somebody already has, Zach Grizzle, because he knows a lot about Shermans. He's like, what's up with that number 4? And I'm like, well, it's just the one before number 5, dude. Anyway, I know that this is not really correct for casting numbers on the this is the gun Amy uppy downy thing. I think, is that the mantlet? Fuck, I don't know. Anyway, I know that's not really correct for the numbers on those, but see, what had happened was is this was an early casting, and they were still trying to figure out what was going to work, and they were testing them out. And so one of the engineers was like, hey guys, let's number these sequentially, like 1 through 10, before we really put part numbers on them. And then, yeah, anyway, whatever. You can make up all kinds of stories. But anyway, it looks cool, right? I'm gonna leave it on there. So that's that. Now, what is going on with all of this shit all over the side of the thing? Well, yeah, applique armor. I mean, I could not pass that up. That's just a thing with Shermans, and it's cool, and it allows me a little bit of playtime, you know, because again, this, remember, is any tank. This is not a specific tank. This is a could have been tank. And so, you know what happens? I get a little nutty, and I've been studying a lot about applique armor, and I know that in general it was not considered to be all that effective. Maybe maybe the concrete and sandbags is the stuff that was not very effective. I've heard that said. But there were other versions. I mean, fuck, in the Pacific theater, where at least initially they were dealing with like 40 millimeter armor piercing rounds from the Japanese, they were putting big, thick chunks of wood on the side of them. So, you know, whatever works. And it's totally easy to imagine that, you know, this is a tank that got delivered to Belgium in late December of '44, and they were already worried about sneaky Germans with Panzerfausts and doing whatever they could, and some sergeant was like, hey, go over to that bombed out steel plant and give me a bunch of structural steel and let's weld that on here. I mean, I would have. You know, again, it's wartime and dudes do weird shit, but I don't think that 6-inch mild steel channel would have really been that great at stopping an 88, but yeah, anyway, it's fun, it looks cool. And so what I've got going on here is that I have I've got the bottom one just lightly tacked with super glue to the vertical supports that are behind there, and then all of the rest of them are glued to each other. So what I'll be able to do is pop this whole thing off of here as one big piece, because I'm going to paint it with some rust and some steel tones and do some different things to it, and I want to be able to do that separate from the rest of the tank. So that's what's happening there. Yeah, now, funny story, I'm not really laughing at all, because when I was doing this, I decided that the good tactic would be to put a little bit of tamiya extra thick. Just like extra thin, but thicker, on the edge of the piece that was already stuck to the model, and then stick the next one onto it. And I thought that made sense because it wouldn't wick all the way along the length of that and end up sticking the whole business to the vertical supports, because that would be a problem, right? So that's why I had it out. And I did all of that, and I was feeling pretty cool about all of my adventures in applique armor. And I was done, and I reached and grabbed this bottle by the top and went to lift it up and put it away over there. And in the process, that's when I realized, yeah, I didn't screw the fucking lid on. And the lid stayed in my fingers, and the bottle went flying off upside down and dumped. Yeah, all of that melted cutting mat right there, yeah, that's what soaking in tamiya extra thick for a few hours will do to your cutting mat. And you're like, yeah, okay, so no big deal, it's cutting mat, you can always get a new cutting mat. Yeah, the problem is, that's where the tracks were sitting. Yeah, so fuck me. Yep. Those are thoroughly ruined, melted. Yep. And so I'll be right after I finish filming this video segment, going and ordering another box from Sprue Brothers. And you're like, well, but wait a minute. Why don't you just put mud and, weather it and nobody will even notice? Yeah, not so much. I don't want to do that. These sections are the front and the back, so they are kind of angled down to the ground. But I'm not planning on having super muddy tracks, and I'm not going to compromise just because I'm a fucking idiot. So, I'm not going to do that. Well, okay, how come, why don't you just CAD some up and print some? Yeah, well, I could, but I'm already running behind. Today is December the 1st, and my goal was to have all this construction shit done by today so I'd have a month of painting in front of me. Because even though it's arbitrary, the whole point of this group build is to finish by the 31st of December. Yeah, I don't have time for this shit because I still have other things that I want to design and make for this. I need to put some junk on the front right here. I need to do some stowage. Yeah, I don't have time for this shit. So for the $25 that another kit will cost me, yeah, it'll be here next week and I'll be moving on, and I'll just take these and put them in that box to save for myself for later or to give away to somebody who does want muddy tracks. So, yeah. You see what I mean about misadventures. This thing with melting the track, because I spilled the glue on it, yeah, not cool. I really don't spill very often or whatever. I drop things on the floor all the time because of my stupid lobster hands, but dropping a bottle of glue on my bench, yeah, not cool, not fun. And of course, it's a cascading disaster, so yeah, whatever. Anyway, I'll get back to it when I get back to it. Anyway, that's it. That's enough. As always, I appreciate you watching. Much love.